The Galactic Armada hovered on the edges of the Sol system, an endless sea of warships blotting out the stars. Hundreds of worlds had fallen to them, entire civilizations crushed beneath their advance. Now it was Earth's turn. The high command of the invaders had expected immediate surrender. After all, no species had ever survived an encounter with their fleet. Their technology was superior. Their numbers were overwhelming. Their weapons could reduce planets to molten rock in hours. Yet when their ultimatum was sent, humanity's response was not surrender. It was a single ship. One ship. Not a fleet. Not an armada of its own. Just one vessel, barely the size of a destroyer, painted in deep black with no insignias, no markings. It drifted out from Earth's orbit, heading straight for the enemy's lines. In the command center of the invasion force, Supreme Admiral Vorlon of the Dominion watched the feed with disbelief. He turned to his second-in-command, a reptilian officer with jagged plates running down his spine. "Are they mocking us?" Vorlon growled. His officer hesitated. It appears so, Supreme Admiral. No species has ever responded like this before." The crew on the bridge remained silent, each of them exchanging uneasy glances. They had razed empires, crushed resistance fleets that numbered in the thousands. Yet this was something they had never seen before. Vorlon slammed his fist against the console. "Fools! They think one ship can stand against us?" He sneered, baring his fangs. "Prepare the fleet. I want that vessel destroyed. Send a message to their leaders. Let them know this insult will cost them dearly." At that moment, the mysterious human ship hailed them. A holographic projection flickered to life on the command deck, revealing a human officer clad in a dark uniform. His expression was unreadable, his eyes sharp and cold. "This is Captain Darius Kane of the UHS Revenant," he said, his voice calm, almost casual. "I'm here to negotiate your surrender." Laughter erupted across the command deck. Officers sneered. Some outright doubled over with amusement. Surrender? The idea was ludicrous. Vorlon leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the projection. "You dare speak to me of surrender, human? You face the might of the Dominion? We have reduced entire civilizations to ashes. Your planet will burn like all the rest." Captain Kane didn't blink. His voice remained steady. "You misunderstand, Admiral. I'm not asking for our surrender. I'm offering you yours." The laughter died instantly. A silence, deep and thick, settled over the bridge. Vorlon's eyes narrowed. He had faced enemies who bluffed before, who made bold declarations in the face of doom. This felt different. "You are either the bravest or the most foolish creature I have ever encountered," Vorlon said. "Tell me, Captain, what makes you think you stand a chance against us?" Kane leaned slightly forward, and for the first time, a faint smile touched his lips. "Because you don't understand what this ship is." Without another word, the transmission cut off. Vorlon roared in fury. "Fire! Destroy that ship!" The command was given, and 100 Dominion warships opened fire. Beams of raw energy, missiles and kinetic projectiles streaked toward the lone vessel. A barrage that could wipe out an entire fleet. Then, something impossible happened. The Revenant didn't evade. It didn't even attempt to raise shields. Instead, it simply moved, just a fraction of an inch, before vanishing entirely. Not cloaking. Not teleportation. It was as if reality itself had folded around it. The incoming fire passed harmlessly through empty space where the ship had been. Before anyone could react, the Revenant reappeared behind the lead warship of the Dominion's vanguard. A single shot was fired, a small pulse of violet energy. The Dominion warship, a vessel 5 times its size, didn't explode. It didn't even burn. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there. Then it was gone. No debris, no wreckage, just nothing. The bridge of the Dominion's command ship erupted into chaos. Officers shouted, scanning their sensors, trying to understand what had happened. It wasn't destroyed, one of the tactical officers stammered. It was erased. Vorlon felt a chill crawl up his spine. He turned to his second-in-command. How is this possible? No answer came. Across the battlefield, the Revenant moved again. Every shot fired at it missed, not because it dodged, but because it seemed to exist just outside of reality itself. And with every move, it erased another ship. One by one, entire battleships disappeared without a trace. It was not fighting. It was not even war. It was extermination. Vorlon clenched his fists. What have we awakened? Then another transmission came through. Captain Kane's face appeared once more, the faintest trace of amusement in his gaze. I'll give you one last chance, Kane said. Surrender. Vorlon's throat went dry. Never in all his campaigns had he encountered something like this. Never had he felt what he felt now. Fear. His species had believed themselves the apex predators of the galaxy, unstoppable, invincible. And yet, in the span of minutes, one human ship had rewritten everything. The Dominion had sent thousands of warships, expecting an easy victory. Humanity had sent just one, and it was more than enough. The Revenant hovered in the void, silent and unmoving, as if daring the Dominion fleet to make another move. But no one fired. No one even spoke. Fear had settled over the enemy command deck like a suffocating fog. Vorlon clenched his fists, his mind racing. Every instinct screamed at him to order a full retreat. And yet, he knew what that would mean. The Dominion had never retreated before. Surrender was unthinkable. To go back, to admit that they had been bested by a single human ship, would destroy their reputation. His people would demand an explanation. His superiors would see it as weakness. They would strip him of his rank, if not worse. But what choice did he have? Another Dominion ship vanished from existence, erased with the same eerie precision as before. The Revenant hadn't moved. It hadn't fired visible weapons. It simply decided that the ship no longer existed. Vorlon's officers looked at him now, their gazes filled with something he had never seen before. Pleading. They wanted him to call for retreat. They wanted him to save them. Captain Kane's voice cut through the silence like a blade. I'll ask one last time, Admiral. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now. Surrender. Vorlon's throat tightened. His entire career, his entire life, had been built on the belief that the Dominion was superior to all others. They had conquered 100 worlds. They had crushed civilizations beneath their heel. And yet here they were, brought to their knees by a single ship, a warship unlike anything they had ever seen. He forced himself to speak. We do not surrender. Kane sighed. Then you leave me no choice. The screen cut out. Then the Revenant moved. If what it had done before was terrifying, what happened next was incomprehensible. The ship flickered. One moment it was in front of them, the next it was behind them. Then above, then below. It didn't move like any ship should. It didn't obey physics, didn't play by the rules of space. It existed where it wanted, when it wanted. A Dominion battlecruiser, one of their most powerful ships, fired a desperate barrage. The moment the weapons were discharged, the Revenant split. Not into 2 ships, not into 3, into thousands, each copy identical, each one perfect. Sensors couldn't tell which was real, which was fake, if any of them were fake at all. Vorlon's hands trembled as the wave of Revenants swarmed his fleet, encircling them in every direction. The Dominion ships opened fire in blind panic, but it was useless. The shots passed through some of the ships as if they weren't even there, while others vanished only to reappear somewhere else entirely. Then, the real attack began. Vorlon watched in horror as entire capital ships collapsed into themselves, crushed as if by an invisible force. Other ships blinked out of existence, their crews screaming over the comms before they were snuffed out. One ship was twisted, not destroyed, not erased, but warped into a shape that was no longer recognizable. The hull crumpled like paper. Metal and flesh fused together, the screams of the crew distorting into an unnatural, gurgling wail before the wreck drifted away, lifeless. This was not war. This was annihilation. The Revenant was toying with them. It could have ended them in an instant, but it wanted them to understand, to fear. Vorlon's mind broke. His pride, his belief in Dominion superiority. It was all gone. There was no hope, no escape. "Stop," he gasped. "Please, stop." The Revenant halted. All of the copies, all of the flickering impossibilities vanished in an instant, leaving only the one original ship. Another transmission opened. Captain Kane stared at him, expression unreadable. "You're ready to talk now," Kane said. It wasn't a question. Vorlon swallowed hard. What is this ship?" Kane leaned back slightly. "A message." Vorlon shook his head. "No ship can do this. No technology can do this." Kane gave a small, knowing smile. "That's because it isn't just technology." The words sent a chill through Vorlon's bones. He had assumed that the Revenant was simply an advanced warship, something beyond their understanding. But what if it was more? What if it wasn't just a weapon, but a warning? "What do you want?" Vorlon whispered. Kane's smile faded. "We want you to understand." "Understand what?" The human captain leaned forward. When he spoke, there was something different in his voice. Something ancient. "You thought you were the apex predators of this galaxy," Kane said, "but you never truly met us." Vorlon's breathing grew shallow. Kane continued. "Every species you conquered, every world you burned, they weren't like us. They were prey. You never fought an actual predator before." A pause. "You have now." Vorlon felt the weight of those words settle over him, congestured at the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. "You came to take our world, to burn it, to crush it like all the others. You thought you knew what we were." The Revenant's engines flared, and for the first time, a glimpse of something vast and incomprehensible seemed to pulse beneath its hull. Kane's next words were barely above a whisper. "You have no idea." The transmission cut. Vorlon's body sagged in his chair. He had spent his entire life believing in the might of the Dominion, in their unchallenged supremacy. Now, all of that was gone, because the truth was undeniable. Humanity had sent one ship, and it was more than enough. Silence stretched across the Dominion fleet, a silence thick with fear and disbelief. The Revenant hung motionless in space, as if waiting, watching. It had torn through their ships like a god plucking wings from insects, yet it had stopped. Not out of mercy, Vorlon realized, but out of something far worse. It wanted them to learn. His mind reeled. His fleet, once the pride of the Dominion, had been reduced to scraps, their numbers dwindling with every breath. Every attempt at retaliation had been meaningless. Every maneuver had been countered before it had even begun. The Revenant did not fight as any warship should, because it was not a warship, not in the way Vorlon understood. It was something else. "Supreme Admiral," one of his officers whispered, her voice barely audible. What do we do?" He had no answer. Then, the Revenant moved again. It wasn't an attack. There was no weapon discharge, no visible energy signature. Yet one of their remaining dreadnoughts simply collapsed. One moment it was there, a towering behemoth of steel and firepower. The next it was smaller, shrinking. Its hull imploded, its structure twisting in on itself as though an invisible hand had crushed it to a fraction of its former size. The Dominion officers aboard screamed, their voices cutting off as the ship condensed into a single blackened sphere no larger than a fighter craft. Then it was gone, not destroyed, not even erased, reduced. Vorlon felt cold horror settle into his bones. He had seen countless weapons, witnessed the power of planetary bombardments, the fury of antimatter warheads. But this was something that should not exist. "This isn't war," he muttered. Kane's voice returned, sharp and steady. "Number it's not." Vorlon turned, his hands curling into fists. "Then what is it?" he demanded. Kane leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "This is what happens when you mistake patience for weakness." The words struck deep. For centuries, the Dominion had expanded unchecked. They had crushed world after world, silencing every resistance before it could become a threat. They had seen themselves as conquerors, the natural rulers of the stars, and humanity had waited, watched, allowed them to think Earth was just another target. Kane's expression darkened. "You never asked why we never expanded, why we never reached for the stars like the others you crushed." Vorlon had never considered the question. He had assumed, like the rest of the Dominion, that humanity was simply behind in development. Now that assumption was unraveling before his eyes. "We never expanded," Kane said, "because we didn't need to." The Revenant pulsed. A deep, unnatural hum filled the comms. Not a sound, but a presence. Something that dug into the bones and settled behind the eyes. A feeling of something vast, something old. Kane's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Do you know what happens when a species is forced to survive, generation after generation without mercy? Without a safety net? When every predator, every force of nature, every cruel twist of fate exists to kill them?" Vorlon swallowed. Kane's eyes burned cold. "They become something else." The Revenant rippled. Vorlon's sensors flared with warnings. Energy signatures spiked beyond measurable levels. Space itself seemed to bend around the human ship, the stars behind it warping, shifting, as if reality itself struggled to contain whatever was waking inside. Something was wrong. Something was... Then the screaming started. Not from his crew, from the ship. The Dominion's flagship, his own vessel, screamed. Metal groaned. Hull plating shuddered as if it were alive, writhing beneath unseen pressure. Warning sirens blared across the bridge, but no one moved. No one could. Because they felt it. Something was reaching inside the ship. Not a weapon, not a force, something worse. Vorlon's vision blurred. His head pounded, his senses fracturing under the weight of something pressing against his mind. He heard whispers, no, thoughts, not his own. Memories, not his. A battlefield, a trench, cold, wet mud clinging to skin, explosions overhead, a man screaming in pain, holding his guts inside his stomach as artillery fire ripped through the sky. Another image. Darkness. A ruined city. A starving child gnawing on something unthinkable just to stay alive. 1,000 moments of survival. 1,000 horrors endured. And then, a singular unified thought that echoed through it all. We survive. No matter the cost. Vorlon gasped as he was released, stumbling back. His vision cleared, but the weight of what he had felt remained, pressing against the edges of his mind. Kane watched him. "Now you understand." Vorlon's breaths came fast and uneven. His officers were shaking. One had collapsed, her eyes wide with terror. Kane didn't move, didn't blink. "We weren't always this," he said, "but the universe is cruel. It forces change. We don't have the strongest ships. We don't have the greatest numbers. We never did." The Revenant shifted, its form distorting for the briefest moment, as if what they were seeing was merely a fraction of what truly existed beneath. Kane's voice was barely above a whisper. "But we learned how to win." Vorlon couldn't speak. The Dominion had faced countless enemies. They had won every war. But this was not a war they could win, because they had not invaded a planet. They had awoken something else entirely. Kane exhaled slowly, as if giving them time to let the realization sink in. "This is your only chance, Admiral." Vorlon stared at him. Kane's gaze sharpened. "Run." The transmission cut. The Revenant did not fire again, did not move to erase them. It simply watched. And Vorlon did the only thing left to do. "Full retreat," he whispered. No one argued. No one hesitated. The remaining ships turned and fled, leaving the ruined remnants of their fleet behind. As they jumped to FTL, Vorlon cast one last look at the Revenant. It remained there, unmoving, waiting, and for the first time in Dominion history, they ran. The Dominion fleet fled like wounded beasts, their once proud warships limping into the void, engines burning hot as they pushed beyond their limits. Some of the vessels sparked and sputtered, their hulls scorched, systems failing. Others simply vanished into hyperspace, their commanders too terrified to even check their bearings before making the jump. Supreme Admiral Vorlon sat in silence aboard his battered flagship, hands gripping the armrests of his command chair so tightly that his claws had punctured the metal. His officers barely breathed, their gazes locked on the displays showing the human warship still hovering in the black abyss behind them. It had not followed. It had not fired another shot. It didn't need to. The Revenant had let them go, and that was far worse than destruction. A slow, shuddering breath left Vorlon's lips. His mind still reeled from the horrors he had felt. The memories that were not his own. The screams, the blood, the endless cycle of suffering that had forged humanity into something beyond mere flesh and bone. They had not won against humans. They had been permitted to live. A Dominion officer stumbled forward, his voice breaking. "Supreme Admiral, what do we tell the High Council?" The question twisted in Vorlon's gut like a blade. For centuries, the Dominion had marched unchallenged across the stars, their conquests leaving empires in ruin. They were the galaxy's apex predators. The thought of explaining what had happened here, of admitting that a single human ship had utterly dismantled their might, was inconceivable. And yet, it had happened. The Dominion was not supreme. The truth was clear. They had not conquered humanity. Humanity had allowed them to exist. A sharp, metallic hum filled the air as the ship's comms flared to life once more. Every officer stiffened, their bodies going rigid. None of them had activated the system. Yet the screen flickered. And there he was, Captain Kane. The human's face was calm, unreadable, but there was something different in his eyes now. Something almost pitiful. "I imagine this isn't an easy moment for you," Kane said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of something deeper. "Coming to terms with the fact that you were never the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." Vorlon swallowed, his throat dry. Kane continued. "The Dominion has spent centuries crushing others. You saw yourself as untouchable, invincible. But the truth is," he exhaled slowly, "you were never alone in the dark." Silence filled the bridge. The Dominion officers stared at the screen, waiting, dreading. "We let you believe you were the apex predator," Kane said, "because you were never worth the fight." A chill swept through Vorlon's body. Kane's gaze sharpened. Until now. The words settled like a weight in the room, heavy and final. Kane leaned slightly forward. "This is how it's going to be. You're going to return to your people. You're going to lie. You'll tell them whatever you need to tell them. Say you fought something unknown. Say you lost to a superior force beyond comprehension, but you will not speak of Earth." Vorlon's jaw clenched. "You will not return." Kane's voice was flat, absolute. "You will not send scouts. You will not attempt revenge if a single Dominion vessel so much as scans Sol's borders again." The Revenant pulsed. For the briefest moment, the stars behind it shuddered. The fabric of space itself bent as if recoiling from whatever the ship truly was. Kane didn't smile, didn't threaten. He simply promised. "If you come back," he said softly, "you won't get to run next time." Vorlon's breathing was ragged, his pulse thundering in his ears. Kane tilted his head slightly, as if studying him. "You still don't understand, do you?" The Dominion Admiral forced himself to speak, his voice hoarse. What are you?" Kane's gaze never wavered. "The last survivors," he said. "The ones who adapted, the ones who never broke, the ones who learned that the only way to win is to be something that can't lose." His words hung in the air, a cold truth that settled deep in Vorlon's chest. Then the transmission cut, and the Revenant vanished. Not with a jump, not with a flash of light. It simply ceased to exist, as if it had never been there at all. A hollow silence filled the Dominion flagship. No one moved, no one spoke. Vorlon exhaled shakily and turned to his officers. His voice was barely a whisper. "We are never coming back here." The crew nodded, some too afraid to even meet his eyes. Without another word, the Dominion ships disappeared into the void, leaving behind only wreckage, silence, and the lingering knowledge that something far worse than them existed in the universe, and it had just let them live. For now. The journey back to Dominion space was silent. No one spoke. No one dared. The remnants of the once mighty fleet limped through hyperspace, their hulls battered, their crews broken. These were not warriors returning home in triumph. These were survivors. And survivors did not celebrate. Supreme Admiral Vorlon sat in his quarters, staring at the holographic star map flickering before him. His hands trembled slightly, the first physical sign of weakness he had ever allowed himself. He clenched his fists, trying to steady them. It didn't help. His mind was still trapped in the moment when the Revenant had looked at them. Not in a way that an enemy does in war, not even in the way a conqueror looks at the conquered. Number the ship, no, the thing, had observed them the way a predator watches an animal that wandered too close to the edge of the forest. A simple warning. Leave. Now, and they had. The door to his quarters hissed open. Vorlon didn't need to look up to know who it was. His second-in-command, Commander Jovar, stepped forward, his movements slow and hesitant. That was new. Jovar had always been the most ruthless among his officers, a man who had relished every war, every conquest. Now he looked smaller. "We are 2 hours from the High Council's chambers," Jovar said, his voice quiet. Vorlon exhaled slowly. "And?" Jovar hesitated. "They will demand an explanation." Of course they would. The Dominion had never suffered a defeat like this before. Never had an entire invasion force been shattered without even wounding the enemy. The High Council would demand to know why. They would demand answers. They would demand retribution. Vorlon closed his eyes. We tell them nothing of Earth. Shovar shifted uncomfortably. Admiral, do you really believe we can hide this? Vorlon opened his eyes, his gaze sharp. We must. Shovar's throat bobbed as he swallowed. They will demand we return. A fleet 10 times the size. We are not going back. Vorlon's voice was steel. A pause. Then, softer. You felt it too, didn't you? Shovar said nothing. He didn't have to. The memories, the visions, that impossible force pressing against their minds. Every single officer who had been on the bridge, who had seen the Revenant's true nature, had felt it. The truth. They had not encountered advanced technology. They had encountered a warning. Vorlon leaned forward, his voice lowering to a whisper. We tell them we were defeated by something beyond our understanding. We tell them we barely escaped. We tell them to never return. Shovar hesitated. And if they do not listen? Vorlon's fingers tapped against the table. Then the Dominion will burn. Shovar's jaw tightened. We should have never gone there. Vorlon let out a slow, shuddering breath. Number, we shouldn't have. A silence settled between them. Then the ship shuddered as they exited hyperspace. They had arrived. The High Council's chamber was a towering hall of obsidian and gold, built to remind all who stood within it of the Dominion's absolute power. The council members sat in a raised semicircle, their faces hidden behind ceremonial masks of polished black steel. Only their glowing eyes, burning reds, blues, and violets, were visible beneath the metal. Vorlon knelt before them, Shovar at his side. A voice boomed from above. Supreme Admiral Vorlon, you stand before this council in disgrace. The words hit like a physical blow. Disgrace. No Dominion admiral had ever heard such a word spoken to them before. Vorlon lifted his head slightly. You lost an invasion force of thousands, another counselor interrupted, his voice laced with fury. An armada strong enough to conquer an entire sector, destroyed before even reaching the enemy homeworld. We must return, another voice snarled. Send a fleet of 5,000, 10,000. Wipe these insects from existence. Vorlon closed his eyes. They didn't understand. They couldn't. The Dominion had always believed strength was the answer. If they lost a battle, they sent a larger force. If they faced resistance, they crushed it without mercy. But this was different. This was not a war they could win. This enemy is beyond us, Vorlon said finally. The chamber fell silent. Then laughter. Low, cold, mocking. A counselor leaned forward, his glowing violet eyes narrowing. Beyond us? Another scoffed. The Supreme Admiral of the Dominion speaks as if he is afraid. Vorlon's claws dug into his palms. I am afraid. The laughter stopped. Silence, uncomfortable, heavy. Never before had an admiral of the Dominion admitted fear. One of the counselors leaned forward. Explain. Vorlon exhaled. We did not lose to superior numbers. We did not lose to stronger weapons. We lost because the enemy is not like us. A murmur spread through the chamber. They do not fight as we do, Vorlon continued. They do not think as we do. They are something else. He hesitated. Then he spoke the words that had been haunting him since the moment they had fled. We have never fought a true predator before. A pause. The counselors studied him, their glowing eyes unblinking. Finally, one of them spoke. You expect us to believe that one human warship defeated the greatest armada the Dominion has ever assembled? Vorlon's eyes darkened. It wasn't a warship. That made them pause. Then what was it? Vorlon's voice was barely above a whisper. A message. A long silence filled the chamber. The counselors exchanged glances. Even they, in all their arrogance, could sense that something was deeply wrong. Finally, one of them leaned forward. "Then we will not return." It was not a question. It was a decree. The decision was made. No Dominion ship would ever set course for Sol again. They would not challenge humanity, not because of diplomacy, not because of fear of war, but because, for the first time in Dominion history, they had found something that could end them. Forever. The decision was made. The Dominion would never return. But Vorlon knew it wasn't over. Even as the High Council decreed that Sul would remain untouched, he could see the unease in their eyes. They did not understand what had happened. They only knew fear, and fear had a way of fading with time. He had seen it before. Wars forgotten, warnings ignored. The Dominion was a machine of conquest. It was only a matter of time before their hunger overpowered their caution. And when that day came, they would all die. 3 cycles passed. 3 cycles of silence. For the first time in Dominion history, expansion stopped. No new invasions were launched. No new wars were declared. The fleets patrolled their existing territories, but they did not advance. And yet, the whispers grew. Other species, once terrified of the Dominion, had begun to take notice. The once unstoppable war machine had halted. Empires that had cowered in fear now whispered of rebellion. Sectors once locked in Dominion control began to push at their borders. Weakness. That was how the rest of the galaxy saw it. And weakness was not tolerated. A hidden chamber beneath the Dominion capital. 7 figures sat around a black stone table, their faces shrouded in shadow. They were not members of the High Council. They did not wear ceremonial masks or robes of state. They were something older, something deeper, the ones who pulled the strings from the darkness. "The Supreme Admiral's report is unacceptable," one of them murmured. "He speaks of impossible things," another hissed. "Ships that erase existence, weapons that defy physics, a war fought without battle." A heavy pause. "If true," a third voice rasped, "then we have made a mistake." Silence, then a cold laugh. A figure leaned forward, their glowing crimson eyes narrowing. "You are all fools." The others turned. "This is not fear," the crimson-eyed figure continued. "This is weakness." One of the others hesitated. "You do not believe the reports?" "Oh, I believe them," the figure sneered. "I believe every word, and I believe we should never have run." A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. "If what Vorlon says is true, then this humanity is the greatest threat the Dominion has ever faced," the crimson-eyed figure said. "And what do we do with threats?" A slow, cruel smile spread beneath the shadows. "We eliminate them." A pause. Then another voice. "The High Council will not authorize an attack." The figure laughed. "The High Council is nothing. Puppets. They see only what we allow them to see." A long silence. Then a single question. "What do you propose?" The crimson-eyed figure leaned forward, their voice dripping with malice. "We send another fleet," gasps. "Not to conquer, not to fight. We do not send thousands of warships to burn their world." The figure's eyes gleamed. "We send one." Another silence. Then a slow nod. The decision was made. The Dominion would return to Sol. But this time, it would not be an invasion. It would be an experiment. To understand what humanity truly was, to learn their secrets, and to prepare for the war that would come, one that would decide the fate of the galaxy itself. Deep in the void, where no light reached, something stirred. A shadow of war, a whisper of something vast and hungry. The Revenant had been a message, but humanity had more than one message to send. And this time, when the Dominion returned, they would not be the only ones watching. The Dominion's second expedition to Sol was not a fleet. It was a single vessel, a sleek black warship unlike any that had ever been constructed before. A vessel designed with one purpose, not to conquer, not to fight, but to understand. The High Council had forbidden another attack. The Dominion's military leaders had sworn never to return. But those who operated in the shadows, the ones who truly ruled, had no interest in fear. They sought knowledge, because knowledge was power. And if humanity truly was the greatest threat the Dominion had ever faced, then power was the only path forward. The ship was named Observer, a fitting name for something designed to watch, to learn, to record. But beneath the surface, it was something else entirely. A test, a trap, an experiment designed to provoke a response, to draw out humanity's secrets, to force them to reveal what they were hiding. If the Revenant was truly the apex of human warcraft, then the Observer would be the bait. And when the monster came to feed, the Dominion would see. Captain Ralvek stood at the bridge of the Observer, his clawed hands resting on the sleek metal console before him. The ship's systems hummed softly, their whispers filling the silence of the void. They had arrived at the edge of Sol's borders. No alarms sounded, no defenses activated, no fleet emerged to meet them. Ralvek narrowed his eyes. "Are we being detected?" The ship's tactical officer, a wiry creature with piercing yellow eyes, hesitated. "Scans show no immediate response. No energy spikes, no active targeting systems." Ralvek frowned. "They see us." It wasn't a question. He knew it as surely as he knew the weight of his own bones. Earth knew they were here. And yet, no response. A trick? A display of arrogance? Or something far worse? Ralvek turned to his communications officer. "Send the message." A single pulse of data shot out into the darkness, carried on encrypted Dominion frequencies. It was a simple transmission. A greeting. A challenge. A test. Ralvek exhaled slowly. Now there was nothing left to do but wait. Wait to see if the monster would come. Hours passed. The void remained silent. And then, without warning, something changed. Not an alarm, not a weapon discharge, a feeling. The bridge lights dimmed. The air grew heavier. A low, almost imperceptible hum filled the walls of the ship. Not from their own systems, but from something else. Something outside. Ralvek's claws twitched. "Report," he ordered, keeping his voice steady. His sensors officer paled. "Sir, I don't know how to explain this." Ralvek turned sharply. "Try." The officer swallowed. We didn't detect anything. No ship, no energy signatures, but what?" The officer hesitated. Then, in a slow, trembling voice, he whispered, "We are not alone." Ralvek's spine stiffened. "What do you mean?" The officer tapped a control on his console, bringing up a visual feed. The screen displayed only the empty void, the blackness of space stretching infinitely in all directions. No enemy ship. No fleet. Nothing. But then, Ralvek's breath caught. A shadow, not a shape, not an object. A shadow moved across the stars, blotting them out, a shifting darkness that had no form, no edges. It was not a ship, it was not anything, and yet it was there. Ralvek's mouth went dry. Then, a voice, not over the comms, not through their systems. It spoke inside his mind. "You were warned." The bridge trembled. The walls groaned. The hum grew louder, like 1,000 whispering voices crawling just beneath the surface of reality. Ralvek's officers gasped, some clutching their heads, others falling to their knees. The shadow moved. And then, something stepped through it. It was not the Revenant. But it was like the Revenant. A ship, if it could even be called that, emerged from the darkness, its surface shifting, its hull shimmering like liquid obsidian. No visible weapons, No lights, no engines, just the weight of its presence pressing down on them like gravity itself. Ralvek's heart pounded. Open communications. A deep, unearthly pulse rippled through the ship's systems. Then, a face appeared on the screen. Not Kane, someone else. A woman. Dark eyes. Sharp, unreadable. Ralvek's blood ran cold. She did not speak. She studied him, as if deciding something. Finally, her lips parted. Her voice was soft, and yet it carried the force of something ancient. "You shouldn't have come back." Ralvek's mouth opened, and the observer screamed, the ship itself. The walls bent, the metal twisting as if it were alive. Lights flickered, screens cracked, the floor beneath them shuddered like something was inside it, moving through it. His officers screamed. Ralvek felt it, felt something reach into his mind, memories, thoughts, torn from him like pages ripped from a book. The woman's voice echoed, not just in his ears but in the depths of his consciousness. "You don't understand what we are." Ralvek gasped, his vision swimming, his very self unraveling beneath the weight of something greater, something beyond comprehension. Then, the darkness collapsed, the shadow swallowed itself, folding inward like a void, and the observer was alone. The ship was intact, the crew was unharmed, but something was wrong. Ralvek trembled, his breaths ragged, his hands clenched into fists, his claws digging into his palms to keep himself grounded. The woman's voice still echoed in his mind. Not a threat, not a warning, a simple, chilling truth. "You don't understand what we are?" Ralvek turned to his crew. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow. He knew what he had to do. They had come to learn humanity's secrets, and they had learned one. Something far worse than war. Something far worse than death. He took a shaking breath. "Take us home." The observer turned, engines flaring. It fled the Sol system, and the Dominion would never return. Because for the first time in their existence, they had seen something that made them afraid to even ask the question. What was humanity? The observer fled through the dark, leaving Sul behind. But Sul did not leave them. Ralvek sat in silence as the ship's engines burned at full power, his mind still reeling from what had happened. His officers were hollow-eyed, their expressions empty, haunted. They had not been attacked, they had not been harmed, but they had been seen. And something about that was worse than death. The woman's voice still echoed in Ralvek's mind. "You don't understand what we are." And now he understood that he never would. No Dominion scientist, no strategist, no warlord could make sense of what they had witnessed. The Revenant had been terrifying, yes, a weapon of impossible power. But this had been something beyond power. They had gone to provoke humanity, to test their response, and humanity had answered, not with war, not with words, but with something far, far worse. A glimpse of something the Dominion could never comprehend. Ralvek exhaled slowly, his hands trembling as they hovered over the console. The High Council would demand a report. The shadow rulers of the Dominion would want to know what had happened. But what could he tell them? That they had looked into the abyss, and that the abyss had smiled? He clenched his fists. Number. They would never understand. The Dominion had spent centuries believing they were the apex of the galaxy, the ultimate force of nature. They had ruled through strength, through fear, through conquest. But humanity did not conquer. Humanity did not rule. Humanity simply was, and the universe bent around them. Ralvek took a slow, shuddering breath. He knew what he had to do. When the observer finally re-entered Dominion space, he would not deliver the report they expected. He would erase everything. Every scan, every recording, every trace of what had happened at Sol. He would delete the logs. He would silence the crew. And then he would disappear. Because the greatest mercy he could grant the Dominion was ignorance. If they ever returned, if they ever tried to understand, they would not survive the answer. The Dominion never spoke of Earth again, not in their archives, not in their war councils, not in the whispers of their spies, as if Sul had never existed, as if humanity had never existed, as if, somewhere deep in the void, a truth too terrible to name waited in silence, patient and unchallenged, a truth that had been ignored, a truth that had been forgotten, and a truth that for the sake of all things must never be remembered. The warship hung in the void like a predator too vicious to be caged, its hull glinting faintly under the cold light of a dying star. The Ares Ascendant wasn't just a vessel. It was a statement, a human fist slammed into the galaxy's fragile table of peace. For centuries, the Galactic Council had preached harmony, balance, and restraint, their treaties binding 1,000 species into a brittle web of coexistence. But humanity? We'd never been good at playing nice. And when we unveiled the Ares, the Council didn't just flinch. They panicked. The commander stood on the bridge, his boots planted firm against the low hum of the deck. He was a man carved from stubborn grit, scarred, unyielding, and tired of apologies. His gray eyes traced the holodisplay flickering before him, a live feed of the Council's armada, a mismatched fleet of sleek Elthari cutters and lumbering Koran dreadnoughts, all converging on their position. They'd come to enforce the edict, Declaration 719, the order that branded the Ares an abomination, a weapon too dangerous to exist. Illegal, they called it. He smirked. Illegal was just another word for effective. "Status," he barked, voice rough as gravel. The lieutenant spun in her chair, fingers dancing over the console. "Shields at full, gravitic cannons primed. The Council's hailing us again, third time in 10 minutes. They're demanding surrender." "Let 'em wait," he said, crossing his arms. "What's the word from Earth?" She hesitated, her sharp features tightening. "High Command says we're on our own. They're disavowing the Ares, claiming it was a rogue project." A murmur rippled through the bridge crew. 20 souls who'd poured their lives into this ship, who'd defied orders and treaties to see it fly. The commander felt the sting of it, too, a bitter twist in his gut. Earth had birthed the Ares in secret, funneled billions into its tech. Nanite swarms, quantum reactors, weapons that could crack moons like eggshells. And now, with the Council closing in, they'd cut the cord. Cowards. "Rogue project," he muttered, almost laughing. "Guess that makes us pirates." "Sir?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her. Fear, yes, but something fiercer, too. Loyalty. "What's the play?" He didn't answer right away. He turned to the viewport, staring at the Ares' reflection in the starlight. It was beautiful in a brutal way. Sleek curves hiding a skeleton of reinforced alloy, its surface crawling with adaptive nanites that could repair breaches in seconds. The ship wasn't just advanced. It was alive, a beast bred for war in a galaxy that pretended it didn't need one. The Council feared it because they couldn't control it. And humans? They feared it because it showed what we could become. "Open the channel," he said finally. "Let's hear what they've got to say." The holo flared to life, projecting the Council's envoy, an Elthari named Vixra, all shimmering scales and sanctimonious calm. Her voice slithered through the speakers, precise and cold. "Commander, this is your final warning. The Ares Ascendant violates every tenet of galactic law. Its weapons threaten the stability of 100 systems. Power down and submit to decommissioning, or we will act." He leaned forward, letting the silence stretch just long enough to unnerve her. "You know what's funny, Vixra? You call it a threat. I call it insurance. Your precious Council's been strangling us for decades, taxes, sanctions, peacekeeping fleets parked over our colonies. The Ares levels the field. Vixra's eyes narrowed, a flicker of violet in the holo. You overestimate your position, human. You are one ship. We are many. And yet you're scared, he shot back. If we're so insignificant, why's half your fleet breathing down my neck? The envoy didn't flinch, but the pause told him everything. She cut the feed, and the holo winked out. The lieutenant's console pinged a second later. They're charging weapons, she said, voice tight. Orders? His jaw clenched. He'd known it had come to this the moment they'd launched. The Ares wasn't built to bow, it was built to fight. And now, abandoned by Earth, hunted by the galaxy, it was all they had left. He glanced at his crew, saw the resolve in their faces, the quiet fire of people with nothing to lose. Battle stations, he said. Let's show them why they're right to be afraid. The deck thrummed as the Ares woke fully, its systems singing a song of defiance. Out there, the Council's ships closed in, a noose tightening around a beast they didn't understand. He settled into his chair, the weight of it all pressing down. Betrayal, pride, and a flicker of something darker. This wasn't just a ship. It was humanity's last stand, and he'd be damned if it went down quiet. The Ares Ascendant shuddered as its engines flared, a deep growl reverberating through the hull. The commander didn't flinch. He'd felt worse tremors on training runs, back when the ship was still a skeleton of ambition buried in Earth's orbital yards. Now, though, it wasn't a drill. The Council's fleet was moving, their ships spreading out like a pack of wolves circling prey. He could see it on the holo display, the Elthari cutters darting into flanking positions, their plasma lances glowing hot, while the Koran dreadnoughts lumbered forward, bristling with missile bays. They outnumbered the Ares 10-1. Maybe more. But numbers didn't tell the whole story. Not with this ship. Targeting solutions locked, the lieutenant called out, her voice cutting through the hum of the bridge. Gravitic cannons are ready on your mark. Shields holding at 98%. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the viewport. The enemy fleet was a swarm of lights against the black, each one a promise of violence. He'd seen combat before, pirate raids, border skirmishes, but nothing like this. The Council didn't fight dirty, they fought absolute. They'd drown the Ares in firepower until nothing was left but slag and silence. Unless he hit first. Unless he hit hard. Fire, he said, the word dropping like a stone. The deck pulsed as the gravitic cannons unleashed their fury. Invisible waves of force rippled out, distorting space itself. The nearest Elthari cutter didn't stand a chance. Its hull crumpled inward, folding like wet paper before erupting in a silent bloom of fire and debris. The bridge crew didn't cheer. They didn't have time. Alerts screamed as the Council returned fire, plasma bolts slashing across the void. The Ares' shields flared, absorbing the hits, but the strain was already showing. Nanites swarmed the hull, patching microfractures as fast as they formed. Evasive pattern, Delta, he ordered. Keep us moving. Target the dreadnoughts next. They're the backbone. The ship lurched, its thrusters roaring as it twisted through the chaos. The lieutenant's hands flew across her console, rerouting power, recalibrating weapons. She was good. Damn good. And he trusted her with his life, with all their lives. But trust wouldn't stop the math. They were burning through energy reserves faster than he'd hoped, and the Council wasn't slowing down. For every ship they crippled, 2 more seemed to take its place. A voice crackled over the comms, sharp and urgent. Sir, engineering reports a spike in the quantum core. It's overheating, pushing past safety limits. He cursed under his breath. The core was the Ares' heart, the tech that made it a monster. Unstable, unpredictable, and powerful enough to rewrite the rules of war. Earth's engineers had warned him, push it too far, and it could tear the ship apart. Or worse. He'd ignored them then, betting on human ingenuity to outpace alien caution. Now that bet was being tested. "Tell them to hold it together," he snapped. "We don't back off now." The lieutenant shot him a look, brief, piercing, but said nothing. She knew the stakes as well as he did. They'd all signed up for this, knowing it might end in a fireball. Knowing Earth had already written them off. The thought gnawed at him, a splinter of rage beneath the calm. His homeworld had built this ship to defy the galaxy, then abandoned it the second the galaxy pushed back. If they survived this, he'd have words for high command. If. Another blast rocked the Ares, the shields flickering as a Koran missile slipped through. The deck bucked, and a console sparked, sending one of the crew sprawling. "Hull breach, Sector 5, someone shouted. "Nanites are on it, but we're losing pressure." "Seal it off," he growled, steadying himself against his chair. "Focus fire on that dreadnought. Port side bearing 270. Take it down." The gravitic cannons sang again, and this time the dreadnought didn't just crack, it shattered, its midsection collapsing into a vortex of twisted metal and venting atmosphere. A cheer finally broke through the crew, ragged and defiant, but it was short-lived. The holodisplay lit up with new signatures, reinforcements, pouring in from a jump point 10 clicks out. More ships. More guns. The council wasn't playing anymore. "Sir," the lieutenant said, her voice low, almost drowned by the alarms. "We can't take them all, not like this." He turned to her, saw the strain etched into her face. The same strain he felt in his bones. She wasn't wrong. The Ares was a marvel, but it wasn't invincible. Not yet. He clenched his fists, mind racing. Surrender wasn't an option. They'd dismantle the ship, lock the crew away, and bury humanity's defiance under a mountain of bureaucracy. Running might buy time. But where to? Earth wouldn't take them back. The colonies were too weak to hide them. "We don't have to take them all," he said finally, a spark igniting in his chest. Just enough to make them regret this. She frowned, but before she could argue, the comms crackled again. This time it wasn't engineering. It was a signal, encrypted, human, and coming from deep space. "Unidentified source," the comms officer reported, voice trembling. "They're asking for you. Says it's about the Ares." He froze. A lifeline? A trap? Either way, it was a shift in the game. And right now, with the council bearing down and the ship bleeding, he'd take any chance he could get. "Patch it through," he said. "Let's see who's still betting on us." The static cleared, and a voice, human, rough, and impossibly familiar, filled the bridge. "You're a hard man to find, Commander. Thought you might need a hand." The voice on the comms cut through the chaos like a blade, rough-edged and human in a way that made the commander's skin prickle. For a moment, the blaring alarms and the shudder of the Ares ascendant under fire faded into the background. He knew that voice. Gravelly, weathered, the kind that carried scars in every syllable. It belonged to a man he'd buried in his memory years ago, a ghost from a past he'd rather forget. But ghosts didn't hail warships in the middle of a firefight. "Who is this?" he demanded, his tone sharp enough to slice steel. "Identify yourself." A low chuckle crackled through the static, unhurried despite the hell breaking loose around them. "You've gotten grumpier, I'll give you that. It's me, you stubborn bastard. Thought you'd recognize an old friend." The commander's gut twisted. An old friend. That narrowed it down to a handful of names, most of them dead or scattered across the galaxy after the last war. But only one had the gall to sound amused while the Council's fleet pounded the Ares into submission. "You're supposed to be gone," he said, voice low. "Off the grid. What the hell are you doing out here?" "Watching you stir the pot, same as always," the voice replied. "Saw the Ares light up the feeds. Couldn't resist. Figured you'd need a lifeline about now." The lieutenant spun from her console, eyes wide. "Sir, incoming signatures. 5 ships, human transponders. They're closing fast from the jump point, armed to the teeth." The holodisplay flickered, confirming her words. 5 jagged silhouettes emerged from the void, their hulls patched and scarred, nothing like the pristine fleets of the Council. Pirate rigs, maybe, or rogue colony cutters, vessels that screamed defiance in every dented plate. The commander's mind raced. Reinforcements? Out here? It didn't add up. Earth had disavowed them, and no colony had the spine or the firepower to challenge the Council. Yet here they were, barreling toward the fight like they'd been waiting for the call. "Friends of yours?" the lieutenant asked, her tone laced with suspicion. "Not sure yet," he muttered. "Patch him through again." The comms flared back to life. "Like the surprise? Took some convincing, but I rounded up a few who still believe in what the Ares stands for. We're here to even the odds." "Even the odds?" The commander's laugh was bitter, edged with exhaustion. "We're staring down a Council armada. 5 ships won't change that." "5 ships and a plan," the voice shot back. "You've got the muscle, we've got the guile. Trust me for once, will you?" Trust. The word hit like a punch. He didn't trust easy, not after Earth's betrayal, not after years of watching allies turn tail when the heat came down. But the Ares was bleeding. Shields down to 60%. Nanites struggling to keep up with the damage. The Council's dreadnoughts were regrouping, their cutters weaving tighter patterns. And those reinforcements wouldn't stop firing just because a few humans showed up late to the party. He didn't have the luxury of doubt. "Fine," he growled. "What's the play?" "Keep their attention," the voice said. "Draw their fire, push those fancy cannons of yours to the limit. We'll flank them, hit their supply line, cripple their jump drives. They'll scatter when they realize they're stranded." It was reckless, insane even. The Ares could barely hold its own, and splitting the Council's focus relied on perfect timing, something they hadn't had since this mess started. But the alternative was dying slow, and he'd never been one for drawn-out endings. "Do it," he said to the lieutenant. "Full power to weapons. Target their lead ships. Make 'em flinch." She didn't hesitate, her hands a blur across the controls. The Ares roared back to life, gravitic cannons spitting death into the void. Another Elthari cutter imploded, its wreckage spiraling into a dreadnought's path. The Council fleet faltered, just for a heartbeat. And that's when the newcomers struck. The rogue ships darted in, fast and feral, unloading salvos into the enemy's rear. A supply frigate erupted in a plume of flame, its debris scattering like ash. The bridge crew let out a ragged cheer, but the commander didn't join them. He watched the holo, saw the Council adjust. Too fast, too smart. The dreadnoughts pivoted, their missile bays locking on to the new threat. The plan was working, but it was fragile. A house of cards in a storm. One wrong move, and they'd all be dust. "Shields at 40%, the lieutenant reported, her voice tight. "Cores spiking again, engineering screaming red." "Push it," he said, ignoring the dread creeping up his spine. "We stop now, we're done." The Ares shuddered as another hit landed, a plasma lance carving a gash along its flank. The nanites swarmed, but slower now, their reserves thinning. Out in the void, one of the rogue ships took a direct hit, its hull splitting open like overripe fruit. The comms crackled with a scream, then silence. The commander's jaw tightened, a cost he hadn't wanted to pay, but one he'd known was coming. "They're breaking formation," the lieutenant said, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "The Council's pulling back their cutters." He looked to the holo. She was right. The smaller ships were retreating, shielding the dreadnoughts as they lumbered toward the jump point. The plan was holding, barely. But the voice on the comms wasn't celebrating yet. "Stay sharp," it warned. "They're not running, they're regrouping, and they've got something big coming." The holo pinged, a new signature blooming at the edge of the system. Massive, sleek, and radiating power that dwarfed even the dreadnoughts. The commander's blood ran cold. He'd seen specs like that once, in classified briefs. Council superweapon, a planet killer they'd sworn never to deploy. Until now. "Guess they're done playing nice," he muttered, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "Time to see what the Ares is really made of." The new signature on the holo-display pulsed like a heartbeat, a colossus of sleek metal and malice dwarfing everything else in the void. The commander stared at it, his breath catching for a split second before he forced it steady. He'd heard whispers of the Council's Ecliptor, a ship so monstrous they'd buried its existence under layers of denials and redacted files. A planet killer, they called it, though no one had seen it in action. Until now. Its silhouette was all sharp angles and glowing conduits, a predator built to end wars before they started. And it was here, sliding into the fray with a silence that felt more threatening than any roar. "Status on that thing," he snapped, his voice cutting through the stunned quiet of the bridge. The lieutenant's fingers trembled as they danced over her console, pulling data from the Ares' sensors. "It's massive. 3 times our size. Energy readings off the charts. Weapons signatures match nothing we've got on file. Sir, it's charging something big." Big didn't cover it. The holo zoomed in, showing a faint shimmer along the Ecliptor's bow, a distortion that screamed experimental tech, the kind that could vaporize the Ares and its ragtag allies in one shot. The commander's mind raced, piecing together scraps of intel from old briefings. If the rumors were true, that shimmer was a graviton lance, a weapon that didn't just destroy, it erased collapsing matter into nothing. The Council hadn't just brought a hammer, they'd brought the end of the game. The comms crackled, the rough voice of their mysterious ally breaking through. "You seeing this? That's their ace. Didn't think they'd pull it this fast?" "Yeah, I see it," the commander growled. "You didn't mention a damn superweapon in your plan." "Didn't know they'd bring it," the voice shot back, a hint of strain beneath the bravado. "We've got a window, 10 minutes, maybe less, before it fires. Hit it now or we're all ash." "Hit it with what?" The lieutenant's voice was sharp, almost breaking. "Shields are at 30%. Core's on the edge of meltdown. We're barely holding off the dreadnoughts." The commander didn't answer right away. He stared at the Ecliptor, its bulk a taunt against the battered Ares. She was right. They were stretched thin, bleeding power and crew with every passing second. The rogue ships were still out there, harrying the Council's flanks, but they were flies against a Titan now. He could feel the weight of every eye on the bridge, waiting for him to pull a miracle out of the void. He'd gotten them this far on grit and gamble. But this was something else. "Divert everything to the cannons," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "All power, shields, thrusters, life support if you have to. One shot." The lieutenant's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Sir, that'll leave us defenseless. If we miss—" "We won't miss," he cut her off. "Make it count." She hesitated, just a heartbeat, then nodded. The bridge hummed as systems rerouted, the lights dimming to a sickly flicker. The Ares groaned under the strain, its frame trembling like a beast pushed past its limit. Out in the void, the Ecliptor's shimmer grew brighter, a promise of annihilation drawing closer. The commander gripped the armrests of his chair, knuckles white. This was it, the line between defiance and oblivion. "Cannons at critical," the lieutenant reported, her voice tight. "Target locked. Firing on your mark." He didn't blink. "Now." The gravitic cannons unleashed a roar that shook the ship to its core, a wave of force so raw it felt like the Ares was tearing itself apart to deliver it. The blast ripped through the void, a distortion that warped light and space as it slammed into the ecliptor. For a moment, nothing. Just silence, the hollow frozen mid-update. Then the superweapon buckled, its bow crumpling inward like a tin can under a boot. A chain reaction sparked along its hull, conduits bursting until the whole thing erupted in a blinding flash that whited out the viewport. The bridge erupted in shouts, relief, disbelief, but the commander didn't join them. He saw the cost on the lieutenant's console. Shields gone, core critical, half the ship dark. They'd hit the beast, but they'd gutted themselves to do it. And the council wasn't done. The comms buzzed again. "Nice shot," the voice said, ragged now. "But you've pissed 'em off. Dreadnoughts are coming back. Full burn. We're out of tricks." The hollow confirmed it. The remaining council ships, enraged or desperate, were charging in, weapons hot. The Ares was a sitting duck, its nanites too depleted to patch the gaping wounds. The commander leaned back, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. They'd taken down the ecliptor, proved the galaxy wrong about human limits. But survival? That was another fight. "Options," he said, turning to the lieutenant. She swallowed hard, scanning the readouts. "Core's at meltdown threshold. We could vent it, eject, and detonate. Might take a few of them with us." A suicide play. He hated it, hated the thought of giving up the Ares after everything. But the crew, those 20 souls who'd followed him into this mess, deserved better than a quiet end. He glanced around, saw the exhaustion, the resolve. They'd known the risks. They'd chosen this. "Do it," he said. "Set the timer. Get everyone to the pods." The lieutenant moved fast, barking orders as the crew scrambled. The commander stayed where he was, eyes on the viewport. The Ares had been his defiance, his proof that humanity wouldn't bend. Now it'd be their torch, a blaze to light the galaxy's nightmares. As the evacuation klaxon wailed, he whispered to the ship, "You did good." The dreadnoughts closed in, oblivious to the trap ticking down in the dark. The evacuation pods jettisoned from the Ares ascendant like seeds scattered from a dying tree, each one a fragile hope against the void. The commander watched them streak away on the hollow display, his chest tight with something he wouldn't call fear. Not yet. The bridge was empty now, save for him and the lieutenant, who'd refused to leave her post. Her hands still hovered over the console, setting the quantum core's overload sequence, her jaw set in a line that said she wasn't asking for permission to stay. "Pods are clear," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in the deck beneath them. "Cores at critical mass. Detonation in 90 seconds. He nodded, his gaze flicking to the viewport. The council's dreadnoughts loomed closer, their hulking forms blotting out the stars, cannons glowing with the promise of a quick end. They didn't know what was coming. A blast that had turned the Ares into a supernova, taking as many of them with it as physics allowed. It wasn't victory, not really, but it was something. A scar on the galaxy's face they wouldn't forget. "Should have gone with them," he said, not looking at her. "Someone had to push the button," she replied, a faint edge of defiance in her tone. "Besides, you didn't." He almost smiled. Almost. She was right. He couldn't leave the Ares, not after everything it had carried them through. It was more than a ship. It was their defiance, their rage, their proof that humanity wouldn't just roll over for the Council's boot, If it was going down, he'd go with it, and she'd made the same call. The calm